My parents abandoned me at a deserted campsite when I was 18. You heard that right. They drove away, leaving me alone at the campsite. No food, no water, just a hastily scribbled note. Find your way home. This is your lesson. They thought it would make me grow up. But what they didn't know was that it was the day I decided to walk away from their lives forever. Hello, I'm Brian, 30 years old, and the director of a survival skills training company. Sounds unusual, but if you knew how I grew up, you'd understand why I chose this path. I was born into a family with a very unconventional way of raising children. My parents believed that only hardship could shape a strong person. From a young age, I had to be independent in ways no child ever should. No help, no comfort, just relentless lessons they called preparation for life. And then, at 18, they took it too far. That day, I realized that this family was never a home for me. It was also the day I decided to leave them forever. That day was a scorching summer afternoon. The sun blazed through the tree canopies, scorching the dry earth below. The hum of insects echoed through the eerie silence of the wilderness campsite. My parents, Richard and Diane, had chosen this place for a weekend camping trip, a rare occurrence in our family. Emily, my older sister, and I sat beside our pile of luggage, glancing around the desolate campsite. No other families, no groups of friends out for a getaway. Just us, surrounded by untouched nature. I couldn't remember the last time our parents took us on a trip like this. But if there was one thing I knew for sure, they never did anything to create happy memories. After setting up the tent and organizing our belongings, we had lunch. A simple meal of cold sandwiches and bottled water. My parents said this was a regular trip, but something felt off. They were too calm, too friendly. No nagging about me being lazy, no scrutinizing glances when I took a break. I was used to their harsh parenting style, so this sudden kindness made me wary. My dad leaned back, stretching his legs comfortably, then spoke. Brian, go gather some firewood. We'll have a campfire tonight. I glanced around. My sister, Emily, looked at me briefly, a flicker of concern in her eyes, but she said nothing. My mom chimed in. Her voice was strangely gentle. It's not far. Just go and come back quickly. A strange feeling crept over me, but I had no reason to refuse. They had never allowed me to slack off or reject a task before. I stood up, brushed the dust off my pants, and headed into the woods, following a narrow trail. They were right. The area wasn't as vast as I had imagined. It would take me about 15 minutes to gather enough firewood and head back. But I was wrong. Dry branches were more challenging to find than expected, and every time I bent down to pick one up, an uneasy feeling crept into my mind. A vague sense of restlessness, but I couldn't pinpoint why. 30 minutes passed. When I finally returned to the campsite, everything was gone. No tent, no backpacks, no car, no sign of my parents or Emily. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath suddenly shallow and rapid. The entire site was wiped clean as if no one had ever camped there. There was no trash, no tire tracks, just an eerie, suffocating silence. And then I saw it. On the rock where we had just eaten lunch, a piece of paper lay neatly as if it had been placed there long before. I swallowed hard, stepping closer, my hands trembling as I picked it up. The messy handwriting stared back at me. Find your way home. This is your lesson. I read it over and over, but the words never changed. At first, I thought this was just a prank. They may have just moved the campsite somewhere nearby. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and called out loudly, Dad, Mom, Emily. No answer. Only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees could be heard. This campsite usually had visitors, but today, not a single soul. A creeping sense of panic began to settle in my mind. I swallowed hard. Why is this happening? The question echoed in my thoughts. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and dialed my mom's number. Call failed. I glanced at the screen. My signal was weak, barely one flickering bar. A wave of anxiety surged through me. I couldn't just stay here. I needed to get out before nightfall. I started walking along the trail leading out of the campsite, keeping my eyes on my phone's signal. After about 2 miles, sweat trickled down my forehead, but my signal finally stabilized. I immediately called my mom again. She picked up after 3 rings. Before she could say anything, I exhaled sharply, my voice filled with frustration. Stop messing around. Come back and get me. Her voice remained calm as if this was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. I'm not joking, Brian. Find your way back. This is what's best for you. I froze. Best for me? By abandoning me in the middle of nowhere? Leaving me to fend for myself? I clenched the phone tightly in my hand. She sighed, her tone carrying that same condescending patience I had heard my entire life. Brian, don't be dramatic. Beep, beep, beep. The call ended. I looked down at my phone, but there was no signal again. After that call with my mom, I knew I had to escape my family. But first, I had to get out of here. I picked up my pace, my footsteps pounding against the dry ground, my mind racing through options. My parents weren't coming back. They wouldn't come back. I couldn't let myself be trapped in this twisted lesson. I pulled out my phone again and dialed 911. Beep, beep. I held my breath, eyes locked on the screen. Please connect. For nearly 10 minutes, I walked while repeatedly trying to call. Finally, 911, what's your emergency? I exhaled sharply, relief washing over me, but my voice was tense when I spoke. I've been abandoned at a remote campsite. My parents left me here, and I cannot get back. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then the dispatcher's voice, professional but laced with skepticism. Can you give me your exact location? Are you injured? I looked around, trying to recall the sign I had passed when we first arrived. I'm near the main trail, by the entrance to Bear Creek Campground. The closest town is, I'm not sure, maybe 10 miles away. I swallowed hard, gripping my phone tighter. I'm not injured, but I have no food, no water, and it's getting dark. The dispatcher quickly typed in the details. What's your name? I hesitated, then decided to give them everything. Brian. Brian Miller. All right, Brian. I've sent a location signal to your phone. Can you stay put? I glanced down the long, empty trail ahead. A part of me wanted to keep walking, to keep pushing forward. But I knew they would find me faster if I stayed put. Yes, I'll stay here. I exhaled shakily, emotions swirling inside me. We're dispatching a park patrol unit to your location. Keep your phone with you, and if anything changes, call us back immediately. Got it. Thank you. The call ended, but inside me, a storm still raged. I wasn't just waiting to be rescued. I was waiting for a new life, a life without them. After what felt like an eternity of waiting, I heard the sound of tires crunching on the dirt road nearby. I had lost track of time. A black SUV pulled up, and 2 officers stepped out, their uniforms bearing the county sheriff's department insignia. One was a rugged-looking man in his 40s, the other younger, probably a rookie. Brian Miller? The older officer asked, his eyes scanning the area, assessing the situation. Yes, that's me. My voice was still tense, but I tried to stay composed. Are you injured? He looked me up and down. I shook my head. No, I'm fine. But my parents abandoned me here. The younger officer furrowed his brow, clearly caught off guard by what I had just said. Abandoned you? He repeated. I clenched my phone tighter and nodded. They drove off and left me a note telling me to find my way home. This isn't the first time they've pulled something like this. The 2 officers exchanged a glance. Then the older one spoke. All right, we're going to take you back to the station. You can call a relative from there. We'll also be contacting your parents. 30 minutes later, I sat inside the police station, a steaming cup of coffee on the table in front of me, untouched. The room was eerily quiet. I wasn't supposed to be here, but this was the choice my parents had made. As soon as I arrived, I called Uncle Jack, the only person in the family who had ever spoken out against my parents' way of raising us. Meanwhile, another officer was on the phone with my parents. 2 hours later, they all arrived. My parents, Richard and Diane, walked in without the slightest hint of worry. No regret, no panic over having abandoned their son in the middle of the woods. Instead, they looked irritated. Right behind them, Uncle Jack entered, his face tense. One look at his eyes, and I knew he was ready to explode. The officer behind the desk spoke, his tone calm but firm. Are you the parents of Brian Miller? My father crossed his arms and nodded. That's right. Is there a problem? The officer glanced at the report in front of him before looking up. The problem is that your son called 911 after being left alone at a remote campsite. According to the report, you drove off without informing him. Is that correct? My mother sighed, crossing her arms, clearly annoyed at the inconvenience. Yes, that's correct. But he's 18. We don't see this as abandonment. We were teaching him a real life lesson. That sentence felt like a slap to the face. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to stay calm. The officer tilted his head slightly, his tone slowing. Are you aware that your actions could be considered abandonment of a dependent? He had no transportation, food, water, or immediate way to contact anyone. My father scoffed. He's not a child. He's more than capable of taking care of himself. We did nothing wrong. Uncle Jack, who had been silent until now, suddenly slammed his hand on the table. Nothing wrong? Richard, you left your son stranded in the woods like a reckless idiot. Do you two even understand what boundaries are? My mother shot him a glare. Stay out of this, Jack. This isn't your business. Not my business? He let out a bitter laugh. Do you know how many years I've warned you about this? Do you think parenting means dumping your kid in the wilderness and telling him to survive? This isn't military training. My father folded his arms, his voice icy. He's 18. He can handle himself, can't he? The officer leaned forward, lacing his fingers together. You're right about one thing, Richard. His gaze locked onto my father. Brian is 18, and that means you no longer get to decide for him. The room fell silent. My parents stared at the officer as if he had just knocked the wind out of them. Uncle Jack turned to me, his voice gentler now. Brian, you can come home with me. You don't have to go through this anymore. I met his eyes and felt something close to safety for the first time that day. But just as I was about to answer, my mother's voice shrieked. No, he is our son. He's coming home with us. The officer turned to her, his voice sharper than ever. No, Diane. As you just said, Brian is 18. That means the choice is his. After the officer's words, I said nothing. I stood up and walked straight to Uncle Jack's car. My parents remained frozen, stunned by a reality they had never considered. They had always believed they could control me forever. But for the first time, they realized they had lost what they saw as their property. Uncle Jack followed behind me, giving my shoulder a reassuring pat. I didn't need to look back, but I did. I turned to face them, Richard and Diane, the people who gave me life but never truly treated me as their son. Consider me dead from the moment you left me in that forest. My voice was eerily calm, but every word was sharp as a blade. My mother's mouth fell open as if searching for something to say, but no words came out. My father stood still, his face expressionless, but I knew he was shaken. I turned away and walked on. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to hold me back. That night I couldn't sleep. Uncle Jack's house was quiet, but everything was unbearably loud inside my head. Memories played like an old film, rewinding scenes I had tried hard to forget. I remembered the time my mother deliberately left me behind in a supermarket. I was 10 years old. One second I was holding her hand. The next, she was gone, disappearing into the sea of people. I panicked, running through the aisles, calling for her through tears. 15 minutes later, I finally found her when I broke down. She just stood there, arms crossed, completely unfazed. You found your way, didn't you? Good. Now you know how to take care of yourself. No hug, no apology, just cold indifference, like I was nothing more than an animal being trained. When I was 12, I asked Emily to help with my homework. Then they found out. No one can help you with your homework, my father shouted. If you can't figure it out alone, you deserve to fail. That night, they forced me to study alone until 2 a.m. No textbooks, no guidance, just the dim glow of a lamp and numbers I couldn't understand. And Emily? She was punished too for helping me. When I was 16, I had a high fever. My head spun, my body burned, and I was too exhausted even to sit up. I begged my mother to let me stay home from school. She refused, her voice cold and detached. Life doesn't stop just because you're not feeling well. Get up. And so, I dragged myself to school that day. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I collapsed onto my desk, my whole body trembling. The teacher had to call the nurse, and only when the school contacted her did my mother finally come to pick me up. But she never asked if I was okay. She was angry that I had inconvenienced her during work hours. And now, at 18, they have abandoned me once again. Exhausted, I drifted into sleep without even realizing it. The following day, my parents showed up at Uncle Jack's house. At 8 a.m., angry, impatient knocks echoed through the door, more frustration than concern. I sat in the kitchen, gripping my coffee cup, with no intention of getting up. Outside, my father's voice rang out loud and irritated. Jack, open the door. We need to talk to Brian. Uncle Jack sighed, set his newspaper down and stood. Before opening the door, he glanced back at me, silently asking if I wanted to see them. I said nothing, I just shook my head. The door swung open. Uncle Jack stood firm, his voice unyielding. He doesn't want to see you. My mother immediately tried to push past him, but he blocked her. He is our son. He belongs at home with us, she snapped. Uncle Jack didn't budge, his eyes cold. You still have the nerve to call him your son? To demand he come home? He tilted his chin toward them, his voice dropping lower. You abandoned him in the woods and expect everything to return to normal? My father's brow furrowed. He tried to sound calm, but the irritation seeped through his tone. It was just a lesson, Jack. Brian is blowing this way out of proportion. Uncle Jack let out a sharp, humorless laugh. His eyes filled with disgust. A lesson that could have left your son dead in the forest with no one to find him. Richard? My mother crossed her arms, her voice turning defiant. This isn't your business, Jack. Stay out of our family matters. Uncle Jack inhaled deeply, then spoke, slow and deliberate, each word landing like a hammer. No, Diane. The moment you abandoned Brian, the moment he had to call 911 to save himself, that is when it stopped being just your family's business. Silence. For the first time, they had no response. Anything else? Uncle Jack's patience was gone. If not, leave. They lingered for a few seconds as if waiting for something. But nothing came. Finally, my mother turned away, pulling my father with her. They stepped off the porch, entered their car, and drove off. And that was the last time I saw them for years. I had the final image of them, leaving Uncle Jack's house, carrying nothing but their pride and failure. 2 weeks later, I received an email confirming my acceptance into the University of California, Berkeley Business Administration program. I blinked a few times, rereading it repeatedly, almost afraid I had misread it. Once I was sure it was real, I set my phone on the table and exhaled deeply, letting the weight sink in before sharing the news with Uncle Jack. He was in the living room, carefully fixing an old radio. A soft click echoed as he tightened a loose screw with a screwdriver. When he noticed me standing there, he looked up, his gaze questioning. I got in. My voice was calmer than I expected, but inside, everything was surging. Uncle Jack didn't say anything right away. He studied me for a moment, then gave a slight nod. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, a subtle expression of pride in his way. Good. Now pack up. I'll help you move into the dorm. No over-the-top congratulations, tears, or dramatic hugs like in some TV shows. Just acknowledgement, trust. And for me, that was enough. The day I moved into my dorm, my only possessions were a small suitcase and a backpack. I unpacked by myself, glancing around the modest yet quiet room. There was no more tension every time I walked through a door, no more fear of being controlled or judged. But freedom came with responsibility. With no financial support from my family, I had to manage everything independently. I took out a low-interest student loan to cover tuition and immediately started looking for a job. At 5 a.m., my shift began at a campus coffee shop. The first few weeks were tough. Standing behind the counter and making coffee nonstop before sunrise wasn't easy. But I adjusted. Somehow, having a packed schedule made me feel more grounded. On weekends, I took the bus back to visit Uncle Jack. His house wasn't too far, but just far enough to make me feel like I was stepping away from the intensity of college life. Uncle Jack welcomed me when I came home as if I'd never left. No lectures, no forced lessons, no disappointed looks. Just a warm dinner, a cold beer waiting on the table, and conversations where I didn't have to watch every word I said. We sat there, sometimes talking about football, politics, or random things that happened at school. And that's when I realized, family isn't where you're born, it's where you're valued. My college years weren't like most students. Between lectures and part-time jobs to cover expenses, I spent nearly all my free time developing skills I believed would one day be practical. After being abandoned in the woods by my parents, I knew I needed to learn how to survive. I devoured books on survival, watched documentaries on wilderness survival, and studied escape techniques for extreme conditions. The internet became my most excellent resource. I taught myself everything, from starting a fire without matches to finding clean water in the wild to signaling for rescue without communication devices. The more I learned, the more precise the truth became. Most people have no idea what to do in an emergency. One day, during a shift at the cafe, I overheard a group of customers talking about a hiker who went missing in the woods. He had been lost for 3 days before being found, completely exhausted, barely surviving. And that was the moment it clicked. Why not turn my knowledge into something that could help others? I started small. I created a YouTube channel to share essential survival tips, things I had learned from books, videos, and personal experience. At first, no one cared. But then, one of my videos, How to Survive If You Get Lost in the Woods, unexpectedly gained thousands of views. I kept filming simple tutorials on my old phone, uploading them online, and soon, I realized that many people were interested in this. Survival skills weren't just for adventurers. Anyone could find themselves in a life-threatening situation, and if they didn't know how to handle it, the consequences could be devastating. After graduating, I decided to take things further. With a little savings from my part-time jobs and a small loan, I officially launched my own survival training company. First, it was just me. I did everything from building the website to running social media ads to organizing in-person courses. I started with basic training programs. How to survive if lost in the wilderness, navigating when disoriented in the wild, signaling for rescue without a phone, basic first aid without medical supplies. I didn't just teach theory. I took students into real-life survival environments, hands-on training that forced them to adapt and learn. And it worked. Within a year, my company started gaining attention. Backpackers, hikers, even corporate teams looking for survival-based team-building experiences began signing up. By year 3, I expanded, partnering with rescue organizations and emergency response teams. And that's when I realized something. Everything I built today started years ago. On the day I was abandoned at Bear Creek Campground. They thought they were breaking me. They thought they were pushing me into hardship, forcing me to fail. But that moment, the lesson they forced upon me, became the foundation of my success. I became self-sufficient just like they wanted, but not in the way they ever imagined. Throughout the years I spent building my career, my parents never once called or texted. No congratulations when I graduated. No questions about my job. It was as if I had never existed. And honestly, I didn't care. I knew they were fine because of Emily. Even though I had cut ties with my parents, my sister and I stayed in touch. We texted regularly, sometimes called, and met up when we could. Emily wasn't like them. She never supported how they treated me, but she also never had the power to change it. Still, she remained a part of my life, the one person I cared about in my family. And I felt okay. I had a career I loved, a life of freedom, and most importantly, I had stayed far away from my parents. That was enough. At least that's what I thought. But a year ago, they dragged me back into their mess. It was just another ordinary weekend. I was in my apartment, enjoying the morning with a hot cup of coffee, scrolling through the news on my laptop. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. A name I hadn't seen in 10 years. My mother. I sat still momentarily, staring at the name as if it belonged to some distant past. 10 years. No calls. No messages. And now, suddenly, they needed me? Of course, I didn't answer. Instead, I put my phone on silent, took a sip of coffee, and returned to reading. I wanted to see how long they would keep trying. The calls kept coming. 5 minutes, 10, 20. They weren't giving up. At 40 minutes, the ringing stopped. I looked at my screen, 42 missed calls. I let out a quiet laugh. Then a text popped up. Your father and I are in serious trouble. Please help us, Brian. Call us back as soon as you get this. I stared at the message for a few seconds. Then, without hesitation, I deleted it. By noon, Emily called. She never called me like this in the middle of the day, so I knew something was wrong. I picked up, and her voice came through immediately. Tense but unsurprised. Brian, are you free? Let's meet at the usual spot. I paused for a second, then nodded. All right, 30 minutes. We met at our usual cafe, where we had always gone whenever there was something serious to discuss. Emily had arrived first, sitting in our usual corner. When I walked in, she stared into the distance, deep in thought. I sat down, looking directly at her. What's going on? I got straight to the point. Emily looked up, pressing her lips together before speaking. It's about Mom and Dad. I didn't react. I just waited. She took a deep breath, then spoke slowly. They tricked me into giving them money. They said it was for an investment and promised there'd be returns. But in reality, she hesitated, her eyes darkening. They gambled it away. I didn't say anything. I just watched her, waiting for the rest. Not only that, but they also took out a mortgage on the house. Emily's voice dropped, laced with anger. I overheard them talking, and that's when I realized they lost everything. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. They screwed themselves over and thought they could drag you down with them? Emily nodded. But then, she lowered her voice. Like what she was about to say was even worse. Brian, she hesitated, then met my eyes. They've been watching you. I frowned. Watching me? Yes. They know you're successful. They know you're independent. And they know you're making money. Emily bit her lip. They were just waiting until you were rich enough to come for you. I tightened my grip around my coffee cup, irritation creeping into my chest. So this was their plan all along. Can you first, then come after me. Emily nodded. And you know they won't stop. That's why I had to warn you. Be careful. The following day, they showed up at my company. I had expected this. After 42 missed calls yesterday and everything Emily had told me, this was inevitable. At first, I considered avoiding them. I had a busy day and zero interest in dealing with them. But then a thought struck me. I had been running from them long enough. It was time to end this. They walked into my office, looking exactly as I remembered them, but they were no longer in control this time. My mother forced a smile, her eyes trying to appear warm. My father, as usual, kept a serious expression. But I could see the impatience behind his gaze. Brian, you look so different. How long has it been since we last saw each other? My mother's voice was overly friendly and unnatural. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. 10 years, I smirked. They hesitated for a moment but quickly regained composure. How have you been? We've always thought about you. I let out a sharp laugh, cutting them off. Get to the point. Why are you here? My father sighed, leaning forward. The thing is, we made some bad investments. The bank is about to take our house. Can you help us with $150,000? I raised an eyebrow, then laughed. Bad investments? I repeated, mocking their words. I tilted my head, studying them for a moment before shaking it. You mean investing in a casino, right? I already know everything. There was nothing left for them to hide. I met their eyes, my voice firm and final. Go home. I don't have money to spare. And like I told you before, I died the day you left me in that forest. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The fake smiles disappeared, replaced by anger and frustration. My mother crossed her arms, glaring at me. My father's tone hardened, no longer pretending to plead. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't be where you are today. He planted his hands on my desk, staring me down. Leaving you in that forest made you stronger. It gave you the survival skills that got you here. I stared at him for a second, then laughed. An honest, genuine laugh. Not because he was right, but because I couldn't believe he thought that. At that moment, a thought flashed through my mind. A thought I never imagined I'd have. Revenge. I looked at them, and my smile wasn't mockery this time. It was calculated. All right. My voice was eerily calm. You need $150,000 to get the house back, right? Fine. I'll give you $250,000. $150,000 to save the house. Another $100,000 for your retirement. How does that sound? They froze for a second. Then the anger vanished. For the first time in the entire conversation, my mother smiled. Brian, I knew you still cared about us. Her voice was sickeningly sweet. My father nodded, skepticism replaced with satisfaction. But then I continued. However, I have one condition. The air in the room turned ice cold. Silence. They waited. I crossed my arms and looked them straight in the eye. I will abandon you in the forest. My mother's mouth fell open. My father's face darkened, his brow furrowing. I spoke slowly and clearly, emphasizing every word. If you can find your way out within 3 days, I'll give you the money. A few seconds of dead silence. Then my father slammed his hand onto the desk. His voice was low, seething. You ungrateful little bastard. This is how you treat your parents? I shrugged. Your choice. No one's forcing you. Calmly, I pressed a button on my office phone. Security, please escort our guests out. 2 security guards stepped in. My parents shot to their feet, their faces red with rage. You'll regret this. My mother shrieked as they were shoved toward the door. I didn't respond. I just leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, watching them get dragged out of my office, the same way they once left me behind. I thought it was over after yesterday. My parents had been thrown out of my company, left with nothing to cling to. I had cut ties with them once and for all, but I underestimated them. The following day, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First, I ignored it. I had a routine. Enjoy a quiet morning, make coffee, and check my work emails before heading out. But the calls kept coming, one after another. Then my security guard called. I frowned and picked up. Boss, we have a situation. His voice was tense. You might not want to come in today. I paused. Why? There's a mob of reporters outside. Cameras, microphones, a whole damn crowd. The media is after you. A wave of irritation rose in my chest. What the hell did they do now? Right then, my phone buzzed again. My assistant. I answered, and her voice was shaky. Brian, have you seen the video? I frowned. What video? She took a deep breath. It's everywhere. I just sent you the link. Watch it. Now. I opened my phone and clicked on the link. A video popped up. I hit play, and instantly I understood. My parents had edited the recording from yesterday. There was no footage of them begging for money. There is no context about their gambling debts or their attempt to manipulate me. There was no mention of the financial offer I made. Just one single clip: me, sitting at my desk, looking them in the eye, my voice cold and sharp. I will abandon you in the forest. I'll give you the money if you survive for 3 days. That was it. Nothing before. Nothing after. Just that one sentence makes me sound like a heartless monster trying to throw my parents away for revenge. Below the video, the comments were a wildfire of outrage. Who treats their parents like this? This guy got rich and forgot who raised him. What a cruel, ungrateful son. They cared for him for years, and now he wants to dump them in the wilderness? I stared at the screen, a cold sensation spreading through my body. They did this. They went this far. As soon as the video ended, my phone rang again. Uncle Jack. I picked up. Brian, are you okay? His voice was low, tense. I just saw the video. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. I can handle it. I wasn't surprised he called. He knew I wasn't the kind of person that video portrayed. But he also knew how ruthless the media could be. My parents didn't need me for 10 years. But now that they needed money, they had no problem painting me as a villain to get it. I didn't know what they thought would happen when they released this, but if they wanted a war, I wouldn't let them win. Right after my call with Uncle Jack, I dialed Emily. She picked up on the second ring. Brian. Her voice conveyed worry. She had probably already seen the video. I took a deep breath. Emily, will you help me? There was no hesitation. Of course. Meet me at your office at 9:30. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I wasn't alone in this. After hanging up with Emily, I called my assistant. She answered immediately, her voice tense. Boss, this is getting worse. The media is everywhere. They want a response. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes sharp and focused. Invite every reporter into the company's conference room. I'll handle this at 9:30. She hesitated. Are you sure? If this goes wrong, it could get even worse. A smirk tugged at my lips, but my voice was ice cold. I've never been more sure. I hung up, grabbed my car keys, and left my apartment. Today I wouldn't run. Today I will end this. 9:30 a.m. I stepped into the conference room. Beside me was Emily, the only family member I still trusted. In front of us, dozens of reporters sat waiting, cameras rolling, microphones ready. They expected a scandal, a desperate defense, a weak explanation, or even a more considerable controversy. But I wasn't here to play their game. As soon as the questions started flying, I raised my hand. A silent command for them to stop. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. At that moment, the large screen at the front of the room lit up, and a video began to play. The complete, unedited footage from yesterday. No cuts, no manipulation. The raw truth, captured by my office's security cameras. When the video ended, I looked directly at the reporters, my voice calm but razor sharp. This is the truth. You've all seen it. I've uploaded this video to my page. Feel free to download and share it. The room fell utterly silent. 5 seconds. 10. Full minute. I scanned the faces in front of me. Shock. Realization. The journalists who had rushed to condemn me were now processing the fact that they'd been played. I shrugged, my tone void of anger, just stating the obvious. Even if they had agreed to my challenge, I never would have left them in the woods. I leaned back in my chair, voice steady. All I needed was for them to say, "We accept your challenge," and they would have received $250,000 immediately. I let that sink in before continuing. But instead of taking that offer, they manipulated the story, twisting the truth just to paint me as the villain. After I spoke, Emily stood up. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes were firm, unwavering. They didn't just lie to the public. They lied to me. They took my money, promised it was for an investment, but in reality they gambled it away. She took a deep breath, her hands clenched at her sides. I stayed silent for years, but today I can't anymore. The entire room was dead silent as the reporters absorbed every word she said, capturing it all on their recorders. Everyone in that room had now seen the truth, and there was no coming back from it. That afternoon, the media exploded. The same outlets that had labeled me an ungrateful son were now scrambling to correct themselves. The original video spread like wildfire, dragging along a wave of new headlines. The truth twisted, parents edited video to destroy their own son. Who's the real villain? Brian's full story leaves the public in shock. Parents gamble away their son's trust. All for money? I sat in my office, skimming through a few articles, but I felt no satisfaction. I didn't need the media on my side. I just needed the truth to be known. I unlocked my phone and scrolled to their numbers. One last time. Then I blocked them, one by one. No hesitation. And finally, I deleted their numbers, just like how they had erased me from their lives 10 years ago. Before leaving the office, I gave security one final order. If they come looking for me, turn them away. If necessary, call 911. I wasn't giving them another chance. This time, I was the one closing the door, and it would never open again. A year has passed since that day. Life has gone on, smoothly, even better than before. My company is thriving, and I haven't been bothered again. Most importantly, I no longer think about them. But sometimes, news still finds its way to me, even when I don't ask for it. One afternoon, while sitting in my usual cafe, Uncle Jack called. Brian, do you want to hear about your parents? I was silent for a few seconds, then shrugged. Sure, go ahead. He sighed lightly before telling me. They had left town and moved elsewhere. No one knew exactly where, but it was clear they had lost everything. Through a distant relative, I heard their lives were miserable now. I didn't ask for details, and to be honest, I didn't care. They made their choices, and this is my life. My story has come to an end. But now, I want to ask you, my dear audience, what would you have done if you were in my position? Do you think I was too harsh, or did they get what they deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love your perspective. And if you enjoy stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next one. See you in the following story. Goodbye.